Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, Anthony Wade. It is May 22nd still. This is going to be part 3 of a review of an absolutely horrific interview of Dr. Michael Brown conducted by Heather Schott from Mercy Culture Church. Full disclosure for Heather, Dr. Michael Brown is one of the apostolic elders of her church, one of the people that gave them initially the credibility they were seeking when they took over this church. We have covered already the first hour or so of what is a 3.5 hour long video. So buckle up. With them are 2 other people. One is a trauma sexual abuse expert who obviously sides with the belief apparently that the only person who suffered trauma here was Dr. Michael Brown. And the other person is an employee of Heather Schott's, an underpastor, which just lends to the absolute lack of credibility that they have to be conducting this. But this is, designed clearly to platform Dr. Brown, to allow him to paint this picture of victimhood that ignores the actual victims. I would recommend catching up and watching the first 2 videos, as opposed to just jumping in at this point, which is an hour into what is a 3.5 hour long interview. I'm going to try to get through all of this. The first 2 videos I've done totaled, I believe, like 2.5 hours. So, I'm going to try to get through this before I go on vacation. I'll be out next week. So this will pick up at the 51 minute mark, and we will see how far we get in this part 3.
When a father is questioning whether or not he should love on his daughter,
this
or
just
either
happened to me.
a spiritual father and daughter. I remember we're praying into the justice residence of who we're going to have in there, and a spiritual leader in our life immediately corrected and said, you cannot just have women in there. The redemption of Father and God has to be restored to them, so they're not afraid of men. If you never have men around them that are loving on them, then it's never restored.
So she's talking about like this problem that they have at Mercy Culture, where they've been trying to build a 3-story facility to service 100 victims of sex trafficking. And the neighborhood balked at this, and they tried to prevent it, and Mercy Culture Church responded with absolutely no mercy, took them to court, smeared them publicly, slandered them, called them witches, claimed that they were conducting seances because, Jesus. And the notion that she's floating here is that, remember, she's defending the activities of Dr. Brown with Sarah, with the 19-year-old. Saying, it's no big deal. It's just loving to slap people on the bottom when they're 19-year-old women. But she's defending it now within the paradigm of, you can't bring anybody to healing who's been a victim of sex trafficking unless you love on them. So, the obvious correlation she's making is that apparently, it would be okay to playfully slap on the bottom, on the rear, victims of sex trafficking. That's a good way to start this.
Of what a godly, righteous man looks like. They're going to struggle in a marriage for the rest of their life. But again,
is these incidences with Dr. Brown what a godly man looks like? I mean, even he admits that what he did was wrong. He just wants to downplay it. But is it a picture of a godly man to have phone sex with a married woman, tell her to stop sleeping with her husband, and try to meet with her twice for the obvious purpose of having an affair? Is it engaging in grooming activities with a 19-year-old when you're in your 40s?
And this hypersensitivity that actually puts fear in men from healthy, godly relationships with sons and daughters. That's the hypersensitivity. That is not okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not hypersensitive to realize that you've been a victim of advances from somebody who was your spiritual authority and 20 plus years above your age when you're only 19 years old.
I think this is maybe perhaps for segment two
Yeah.
for me for segment two.
Yeah.
But I will say this: we're starting to, Pastor, you're starting to lay the fundamental foundation for what's really going on in our culture, and we're going to see this thread through segment one and segment.
Yeah, because the goal here is to pretend that we're having a cultural argument about accusations, about people who discern right from wrong, as opposed to what was actually done that was right or wrong.
Two, and again, with a hyper focus on your life, Dr. Brown, for this moment, in the greater span of the cosmos, but I really think unto redemption, for making a crooked path in this nation straight. And we're going to make an argument later. There's a time, in Ezekiel 33:7 moment, when the watchman on the wall was to warn of the injustice, and there's a time, but there's...
What injustice? What injustice has been done to Dr. Michael Brown? This is supposedly the trauma expert, by the way. The other guy is the employee of Heather Schott. What injustice has been done to Dr. Brown? What about the injustice that was done to the 19-year-old girl and the married woman? Because you don't hear any of that from this trauma expert.
Biblical justice.
Yeah.
And then there's earthly justice.
Yeah.
And the church has lost its way.
Yes.
Away from biblical justice.
That's right.
To earthly justice.
That's right. And there is no justice.
There's no justice here at all. That's the problem. Neither spiritual nor earthly.
Justice without righteousness.
And there is no justice without righteousness, and true biblical justice restores.
Yeah.
That's right.
Restores what? This is the point I was making in the previous episode. Restores what? Restores to your walk with Christ. Nobody is making an argument that Dr. Brown is not allowed to be restored to his walk with Jesus Christ. He absolutely is. He's entitled to the same mercy and grace that we all, thank God, receive from Jesus. That's not restoration to ministry, to his job.
And it builds. And so it's actually very easy to measure. When you tell them, I don't believe you, nor do I. Because when I just look at the fruit, I'm allowed to measure
Look at the fruit of those
and
ministries
when I look
and
at the fruit,
podcasts and
the
platforms.
fruit is to, God says, tear down the high places and build the kingdom of God. If it's just tearing down, it's not biblical justice.
Oh, Lord. Do you own a Bible? Of course it's biblical justice. Of course it is. Why would God specify in his word qualifications for ministry leadership and then say, well, I'm all about redemption. So, if you had phone sex with a married woman, I'm all about you going right back to work. That's ridiculous.
If there's not a building of the gospel at the same time, so it's very easy to measure. You look at it and you go, oh, that's self-righteousness, that's self-enrichment, that's to...
The only self-righteousness going on here is on Dr. Brown's part. Discernment ministries aren't being self-righteous by pointing out that he's been dissembling.
Build a following.
Yeah.
And then I also...
This nonsensical talking point. These people are sitting on a podcast besmirching anybody else who would dare to do a podcast. Their podcast channel, Mercy Cultures, I'm staring at it now, has 51.9 thousand subscribers, 151 likes on this video. They have more likes than I have subscribers. So the entire argument is beyond hypocritical.
Always ask myself the question, who do they face in reality, publicly, that is walking through this trauma? Who do they pour into? Whose arms are they lifting up? Who are they?
The victims. Do you remember who those were? Because it wasn't Dr. Brown. There were victims here. Those are the arms that are being raised up by discernment ministries who say, you can't go back to ministry.
Restoring. Oh, no, they're not restoring anybody. They're just here to tear down, using and abusing the name of Jesus Christ to build their own following.
How horribly despicable. That's what you're doing, okay? Freud had a term called projection, and you're perfectly exhibiting it at this point. You are abusing and using the name of Jesus Christ to return to ministry a man who we know and has been completely exposed by the Firefly report as a sexual abuser. You can't get away from that.
It's literal idolatry. They deified themselves.
I want to clarify one thing.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I want to speak to those people that have legitimate questions. There's so much swirl of confusion around this story, and there's been so many accusations that I understand to the casual observer that watches a few clips, reads a few articles, reads segments taken out of the Firefly report that could say, it looks to them like Dr. Brown has manipulated, obfuscated, and lied over decades.
No, lackey. That's what the report says. It's not out of context. Those were the findings of the Firefly report, that at every turn, he tried to cover this up. Those aren't opinions. Those are the results of the investigation.
To cover this inappropriate relationship up, specifically with this young girl. And so I want to speak to those people. I believe, this is why we're doing this podcast, is to try to answer those questions and for you to hear directly from Dr. Brown the relationship that he had and the context that these things took place in.
So I assume the next podcast is going to be with Sarah, or with the victims that drop, or with the witnesses rather, who dropped a 137-page report refuting Dr. Brown? Oh, no, you're not going to do that, right? You're just going to put Dr. Brown on a platform to be able to try to deflect and dissemble.
Yeah, young woman, not young girl.
Young woman,
yeah.
Yes.
And I would dispute the credibility of the two people that claim they saw Sarah sitting on my lap. I would dispute their credibility and whether their testimony would hold in a court of law, to be candid.
Wow. And this is what he's been trying to do, which is why it's amusing. This whole podcast started with Dr. Brown's not trying to defend himself. That's all he's doing. So the two witnesses that have testified publicly, not in court, that they saw Sarah sitting on his lap cuddling, and the one that also, I believe, testified about the hand-holding, they're liars. They're liars. And that's the recurring theme throughout this debacle. Is everybody's lying about Dr. Brown. Everybody. Sarah's lying. Kim was lying. Kim's husband Ray is lying. Ron Cantor is lying. Labanovich is lying. Everybody's got it out for Dr. Brown because Satan's trying to tear down his ministry, as opposed to simply saying, this is my fault.
This picture that's painted. I mean, people said, well, she sat, I'll read it on the internet. She sat on your lap and you groped her and kissed her on the lips. It never happened.
Yeah, nobody ever said this. He's clever to do this. I never saw any report that anybody said that he was groping her. But he tries to present these straw man arguments so he can knock them down and at the same time try to knock down the actual credibility of what's being reported as a witness.
Absolutely, categorically not. And the crazy thing, and maybe we could put some of this up, and you got to realize, I've walked in the fear of the Lord. I've sought to honor God. I've spent many an hour laying on my face, weeping before him, asking him to make me like his son.
Just a quick note. Maybe we can put some of this up. Now, the way technology works is it doesn't happen in a vacuum. You have to pre-plan it, right? Earlier, they put up some really bad, stupid quotes from people who posted on his various social media pages in response and calling him a predator and all this other stuff. That's done in advance, right? Whoever's doing the technical work on this podcast for Heather Schott has to have these things already loaded into the system, right? So for him to say maybe we could put some of this stuff up gives you all the indication you need to know that this entire thing was pre-orchestrated. This is not Dr. Brown sitting down for an interview and not knowing what's coming. He knows full well what they're going to cover. He's provided his own rebuttal material, and they have loaded it into the system to be able to put it up on the screen to support his point. And that's really all you need to know about how completely dishonest this entire thing is.
And to allow me to serve his people. This is the kind of stuff that we have to pull from our social media. Here's one. You are disqualified from the race, pervert, sexual predator, protector of false prophets. Here.
By the way, these quotes were in the last episode were already put up on the screen. So while he's talking, there was these little blurbs being put up, which again means they were provided ahead of time to Heather Schott so that she can have her media people load them into the. So Dr. Brown is not just like a guest on the podcast. Dr. Brown has orchestrated this entire mess.
Here's a text that gets sent to me. So someone that knew me well enough to have my cell phone. The Lord is removing your lampstand due to your involvement in sexual perversion. Praying you get saved, Michael. You are completely lost. Here's another we pulled the other day. Mike Brown is a narcissistic, unrepentant abuser who thinks he can play God, ignore his victims. God will not be mocked. You know, anyone that knows me knows I'm a fighter. You know, I don't mind controversy. I get lied about and maligned every day, but this has been very intense. I walk through the airport and, you know, anyone with a platform, you get recognized. People come up with a big smile. I've listened to you for years. Now I see someone look in my eyes like, do you think I'm a predator? Do you think I'm some abuser or groomer? And this is, we got to do better. I'm not, you've heard me in private. I'm not mad at the people who've gone after me.
Yeah. No,
I pray regularly for God's best in their lives. There's nothing retaliatory in me.
I pray for what's best in Dr. Brown's life. Let's be very clear. What's best in Dr. Brown's life is if he comes to true repentance, shows fruit of repentance, truly apologizes to his victims, owns what he did, and goes away. That's what's best for Dr. Brown's life and his walk with Jesus Christ. And they made the point in the last episode, in the last hour rather, about we're saying God can never use Dr. Brown again. Not true. No one's saying that. I think Dr. Brown could be a powerful voice for the importance of putting guardrails up in your life as a minister, and for how to truly respond when exposed for the mistakes and the sins that you make in your life. He could be a powerful voice. God could absolutely use him, but he's not the voice of moral clarity. By the way, he never was. But he doesn't want that. What he wants is simply to step back into his ministry life that he had before this, became public, and ignore what the Bible says about disqualification.
I'm not going to use my platform, which is still substantial by God's grace, to bash others. That's not my intent.
It's true. He does not do that. What he does is he removes all the dissent. So the debater in chief that we have here in Dr. Brown has created what I refer to as like a hermetically sealed heretical bubble, and anything that's fawning over him is allowed, and anything that's against him is removed as divisive. And what that does is it creates a false impression upon many people who probably go to visit his social media that everybody is in agreement that he's the best thing since sliced bread.
But really, we just have to stop and think what we're doing. Yes. You know, I mean, look, you think it's a pleasant thing to sit with my grandkids and say, I just want you to know the truth,
No, I am sure that's a horrifically horrible thing that nobody should have to go through. But you're the reason why you're going through it. Not Round Cantor, not Sarah, not Kim, not Ray, not anybody else but you.
Older teenager, early 20s, is every day you've been alive, the grandpa, that's who I've been. You think that's a joyful to have to sit with your own kids and say, hey, there's some stuff out there, I want you to know what really happened? It's none of their business. They have to be dragged into this. I mean, I don't want to sit here like some baby, but because I'm not the only one. I've got colleagues that are getting maligned and lied about every day, and people just need to understand the devastation they bring. And they say, well, you don't know the devastation you bring. When Sarah left Pensacola, you have to understand she never once said, I'm uncomfortable with this or that, or zero. We interacted. I remember.
Yeah, hopefully Sarah will, she's been very vocal. My understanding from what she has said is that it did take her, I believe, 10 years to really realize the scope of what was done to her. And this is not uncommon. If you had a real sex trauma person, unlike the show that they have on here now, they would tell you. It's very because people always sit there and go, well, I don't understand. Why didn't they come forward back then? Why didn't Robert Morris's accuser come forth back then? Why didn't Mike Bickle's victims come forth back then? As if that somehow takes away the credibility of what happened. And the reality is most victims of sexual abuse don't want to face their abuser. They don't, and particularly when you're dealing with clergy sexual abuse, because that person, Dr. Brown, in this case, is viewed upon kind of like exalted and on a pedestal. And, to have to come against that is to come against your faith. So it's not completely unsurprising that Sarah may have, at the time, not been like, hey, what are you doing?
The first time, the backhanded flick thing, I thought that was stupid. But whenever she saw me next, gave me a big hug. Everything was as normal as I knew. And then, like I said, I thought more clearly, and it was more circumspect and just, interacted just in a more normal way thereafter, more responsible, I should say. And then it's now the end of August, and August 31st, her dad calls me upset. She's moving to Texas. Here's what we were told. Here's what he knew and I knew. She likes an unsaved guy in Texas that she met, and she's moving to Texas. And he's all concerned. Can I talk to her? That's people said, why'd you come up with that line? I didn't. That's what we were told. That's what I knew. So she calls me that day, and it's the first time I ever heard that she had any issue with the way we interacted months earlier. First time I heard it. Her relationship with us through the months, traveling out of state with Nancy, doing stuff with us, had been the same all this time. First time I heard it. So I apologized on the phone. She denies it happened. We went to Olive Garden, August 31st. Nancy and I went to Olive Garden with her. Nancy remembers distinctly, and she remembers what the details of what we discussed. There was no kiss on the lips. There was no this other stuff. She remembers it.
So don't lose sight of the fact that what he's basically saying is, Sarah, you're a liar. You never mentioned anything about kissing on the lips. And by the way, she shouldn't have had to mention it. Either you did it or you didn't. So the notion somehow that Sarah is lying, I don't get where he thinks her motivation would be for that.
Sarah says it never happened, right?
Sarah says that the dinner at Olive Garden never happened.
Dinner never happened. That I never.
Okay, so once again, Sarah's a liar, right? Dr. Brown says this meeting at Olive Garden happened. Sarah says, I don't know what you're talking about. That never happened. And by the way, that's a recurring theme throughout his defense of Sarah, of the Sarah situation, I should say. He's not defending Sarah.
Never apologized that the two of us never met with her.
What did Sarah say to you when she called you? What's her grievance?
That she had not been in a good place for a little while. We didn't know why. I thought it was the unsaved relation, the guy that she met in Texas, and she just said that I don't know the exact word she used. And by the way, what amazes me is everyone perfectly remembers conversations from 25 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Try a conversation 10 minutes after it happened.
Right.
Husband and wife agree on what actually happened.
That applies to you too, doesn't it, Doc?
Yeah.
They all remember perfectly. Even with my journaling and good memory, I don't remember details,
Sure.
but just that it wasn't right. And that somehow it had bothered her. And that's the first time I heard it. So, of course, I apologized. And that's why we immediately had dinner with her that night. So you say,
And this was you and Nancy both.
Yeah,
that
both of
took her
us.
to dinner.
Okay. Well, you could say Nancy's covering for me, right?
Yep.
That it's not real. And I'm just making it up to cover. Okay, so according to Ron Cantor, he'd reached out to Sarah, an old colleague of mine, had reached out to her in late October of last year, talks to her for over an hour, and writes to our board October 31st. And his words, we put them on the screen, that after talking to me, she was disgusted. According to him, and according to his words from Sarah, she was disgusted. She no longer related to us like mom and dad, and she pulled away. All right? So he says that's how she left Pensacola, disgusted with us, no longer relating to us like mom and dad, and pulled away. And He also says that years later she didn't talk about abuse because it's only delayed awareness. Well, that contradicts it. If you were disgusted then, you're already aware, right?
Yeah.
Well,
No, and maybe you should stay in your lane next time, Doc. Okay, you can be disgusted at the behavior and not realize the scope of the clergy abuse for the decade, to really understand what was done to you and how it affected your faith. And again, why are we even parsing this out and defending it? The only issue is that the behavior was wrong. Well, that and the fact that you're basically calling her a liar for half of it.
well, in point that you say, well, who do we believe then? Because I say,
According to the Firefly report, the victims.
she left in good relationship with us. I say we had 13 years of conversation. So if we could put this on the screen. So Nancy and I, before we did this investigation thing, we went through this giant box of cards and found a bunch from Sarah handwritten. So this is the note she leaves. Okay, on my office desk. So she resigned from her job, so she's been away a couple of weeks now from working there. September 13th, 2002, the day before she left for Texas. Okay, this is not made up. This is not reconstructed. This is reality. Dad, remember, she no longer related to us as no longer related to me as a dad.
According to
This new testimony.
Yep.
She was disgusted. Dad, I just wanted to leave you a little something just to let you know that I love you and I miss you so much.
Okay, so let's go back to the first point. This is presented as we're going to have Dr. Michael Brown on this podcast, and we're going to give him no questions were not allowed, and we're going to get to the bottom of this. And yet, they have a copy of a private communication between Sarah and Dr. Brown from September of 2002. Where'd they get it from? Well, they got it from Dr. Brown, obviously. So how does that happen without the coordination, as we said? So this is not some kind of a, hard-hitting journalistic interview. This is a fluff piece that Dr. Brown coordinated. He provided this screenshot of this note, and I'm assuming others to follow, to Heather Schott so that they could put it up on the display during the interview. And that's all you need to know about the honesty that's going on in this video. But number two, who cares? What does this prove? This proves that she had a relationship. By the way, it does prove that she referred to him as dad. I mean, in fairness, I don't think anybody questioned that, but that's fine. So is it possible, Dr. Brown, that she could be disgusted at what happened and still love you and still look up to you as a leader, as somebody who played a very important part in her spiritual formation in her life at that time? I'm going to go with yes. I mean, I think Sarah's been pretty clear that she didn't get to most of the revelations about the true nature of her victimhood until 10 years later, if I'm not mistaken.
Much. 2 exclamation points. Thank you so much for everything you did for me and for my family. I had to wipe my tears off your desk. I guess I can't hide them anymore. I love you, Dad. Please know I would still bend over backwards to make your load easier, because she's always trying to help.
Thank you so much for everything you did for me and my family. So obviously she still had plenty of thanks. It is interesting that I had to wipe my tears off your desk, because I could take that also to be that she was sorry for everything that had happened. And by the way, I believe she was leaving in a day or two, he indicated. So this is a major part of the ending of a portion of her life that didn't probably end the way that she had thought it was. And by the way, he also indicated that she was going through a lot at the time.
I love you. Me. That's who we knew. Sarah, if you're watching this, do you remember writing that note?
I hope Sarah responds. She's been pretty responsive so far. But I'm going to guess that she has a different recollection.
You weren't disgusted with us. And then here, this is the emails, okay? Just a sampling over 13 years. March 16th, 2005. So this is now 3 years later. Happy birthday. Hey, I just wanted to say happy birthday. Lots of love, Sarah. December 30th, 2006. I said, hey, Merry Christmas. Hey, I just got my computer back, but thank you and Merry Christmas to you and a blessed New Year. I don't know if I told you, but in October I had another miscarriage. I was almost 3 months this time, had a really hard time, but getting through it. I guess 2006 was not a good year for me.
How vile. Is there a reason? I mean, I know that you're dying to get back into ministry. I know that you're dying to try to pretend that this stuff isn't real. But is there a reason to publicly put out there a private email from somebody who you admit you did wrong by, and her personal trauma about having another miscarriage? So now everybody in the world knows that not only did she have a miscarriage, but she must have had more than one. I wonder what the trauma counselor has to say about that.
I'm praying 2007 will be better. Miss you a lot. Me. April 13th, 2007. Well, she's had a question about something working years earlier, fire or retirement account or something. But while I'm writing you, I will let you know that I'm going to a church here in Caryville, Calvary Temple. The pastor's Dale Wade. Do you know anything about him? His ministry has been on TBN, etc. Wondering your thoughts. And then mentions one of her kids loved going to children's church. She sings the songs all week long. It's so cute. My parents are going with me Sunday. And her husband said he might. I'm not harping on it. I know God has to pull him in, not me. She tells me she's pregnant. Then
Personal stuff.
Yeah, love Sarah. September 21st, 2011. First, hello, how are you this morning? The little boy she'd asked me to pray for has leukemia, etc. Oh, here's what she asked about the 401k. And look how she signs it, loves and hugs. All right. 2013. Just a note. Hey, how you doing? Haven't talked to you in a long, long time. Figured I'd say hi. The last email I can find, 2015. She was asking me to pray for one of her kids who was really sick. Please pray. Thank you. We're leaning on the Lord and crying out. My strength is definitely gone, and I know it's His strength I need. I'm learning and trying so hard to give it to Him. This is so hard. And it goes on from there. This is reality. This is not.
Yeah. So if I understand what Sarah has said so far about this period of time, again, I mentioned this before, but it took her about 10 years or so, maybe a little more, to come to the realization of her victimhood in this situation, which is not uncommon if you had an actual objective sexual trauma counselor. So showing us personal emails spread out over a course of 10 years, and he showed, I think, about 4 or 5 emails, indicates that she kept in touch with you. It may even indicate that while it bothered her what was happening, she didn't realize the scope of the effect that it had on her. I believe she's previously explained that her faith was kind of wrecked for those 10 years. But do you notice what's missing? Everything after that, right? The last email was 2013, if I remember what he just showed, which is right around the time, I think, that Sarah Monk admits that she started to realize what had been done to her. And then he's got no more emails, right? He's got no more, hey, how you doing? You know, hey, I'm pregnant. You know, hey, pray for this little boy. None of that, right? There's no more personal emails that he's presenting. So I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that maybe after she realized what had been done to her, she stopped having those types of communications with him. But either way, this is all distraction. This is designed to say, what? What are you trying to say, Dr. Brown? Are you trying to suggest that what happened to her was actually not a big deal, and somehow she's lying about it now? Because look, for the 10 years that followed, she sent me like 5 emails saying, how you doing?
Reconstructed. This is the relationship we had for years. And the first time I heard anything different was April 2020 when a grad with one of the leaders came to talk to me. And he said he reached out to Sarah, and Sarah said, well, there was more that happened. You see, back in 2002, after she moved, and people saw the way we were each other, they saw me at Walmart with her, and they thought, now she just moved. Something's going on here. The mother of one grad has a dream that I'm molesting children. two guys among our leaders or staff come to talk to me, and they say, we're concerned you had an affair with Sarah. I said, what? They said, we saw the way you were interacting. I said, yeah, I didn't use all the best wisdom with that, but it was completely innocent, just like with a daughter. Well, we think you had an affair. And now this other has this other dream. It's like, what? Where is this coming from? So I said, investigate. So they appointed a couple. I'm not going to mention their name. They appointed a couple who was also spreading the word that we had an affair. And they called Sarah. She bursts out laughing. I've got all the dates. In November of 2002, they come to me, the couple, apologetic. We're so sorry. Sarah calls me laughing on the phone. I noted in my journal, flabbergasted, like, what are they talking about? And I didn't coach her, tell her.
Okay. I don't know. This is the first I'm hearing about this story, but the first thing that pops to my mind is not really relevant. It sounds like another straw man argument, right? First of all, when you traffic in the stupid natural, don't be surprised when it comes back to bite you in the butt. Somebody's having dreams and suddenly that becomes reality. That's what you taught them. That's the first problem. Secondly, the fact that somebody came to you and was concerned that you had an affair. Nobody in this scenario is accusing you of having a physical affair with Sarah Monk whatsoever. Not even close to anything like that. So it's not surprising to me that if somebody did come to you in error and suggest that they believed you were having an affair, and then they investigated and they discovered you were not having an affair, and then they apologized, that all lines up completely fine with the narrative, since nobody's actually accusing you of having an affair.
Don't say anything, because I knew there's nothing to say. The worst she's going to say is, he was a little too friendly. But that's it. So it's 2020. She tells this grad, give me a peck on the head. She said a kiss on the cheek, which I no recollection of that. And backhanded, give her a swipe on the rear. I said, yeah, that's true. It happened.
So the narrative is that you would backhand her on the rear as often as possible.
No. And I wasn't trying to set anything up. It happened a few times. And again, I remember the first time saying that was stupid. But then I was just stupid enough to do it a few more times, And again, she was affectionate, I was friendly. Stupid, wrong, get it. But look, you saw me in tears over the thing with a married woman. In my journal, that was the issue. Nancy and I went through like a year of my journal notes. That was the issue over those months of struggling and soul tying. I've got to break this. The Sarah thing was not an issue. It was just.
I think Sarah would disagree, Doc, right? But this is the pattern we're seeing here, is just the absolute dismissal of the victims. The Sarah thing was no big deal, and he glosses over. It's like, kiss on the forehead, kiss on the cheek. What happened to the kiss on the lips, Doc? I know you denied it, but that's the accusation, right? What happened to the cuddling? Oh, that's right. They're lying about that. What happened to the hand holding? Oh, they're lying about that. So, you own the kissing on the forehead and you own the smacking on the rear. You disown everything in the middle because that shows the pattern. And I'm sorry, in order for you to be telling the truth, Sarah Monk has to be lying. And the reality is that this video is designed to call your victims liars.
It was stupid. It was no big deal. So in 2020,
and the Firefly report completely supports what the victim's testimony is, not yours. Right? That's how they concluded sexual abuse.
20, when it was brought to me, I said, it's true. And by the way, the people have said, well, you didn't truly repent because you didn't list everything you did. First, I don't know that that's biblical. If someone comes and says, I've been struggling with porn, do you have to get up and say, here are all the websites I went to? Here's what I was doing while I was on the websites. Here's
every date.
Right. Or I committed adultery. Well, here are the amount of times we were together here. No. So the other thing is, in order for me to do that with the Sarah thing, now I have to speak against her. I have to say, well, no, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true.
But that's what you're doing now. You're calling her a liar now, and your defense is, well, I didn't want to do it then because I didn't want to call her a liar.
I mean, I did it today because I had to.
Oh.
But I've taken full ownership all along the way. And no one asked me anything about Sarah from 2002 until 2020.
So in 2020, when that student, the student reaches out to you and said that the student spoke to Sarah, did you at that point reach out to Sarah?
Yes, I did. That's the other thing. Well, why didn't you reach out? I did. We can put the email up if we want. First I sent her a note on Facebook Messenger, which I can't get because I imagine she blocked me, but I can't access that.
Yeah.
I sent her a note the moment he reached out to me, this grad, who was also my personal assistant. And here's what's interesting. No one, all my personal assistants, everyone who traveled with me around the world, no one has brought an accusation anywhere from around the world of anything questionable.
Yeah, no one's making those accusations, so why are you bringing it up? We're talking about two things that happened in 2001 and 2002.
Okay, so
Huge. That's huge.
No, it's not huge, Heather. That's absurd. Don't get me wrong. If there was reports from around the world, that would be really bad. You know, but I don't think anybody in this sad story are making any accusations other than these two individual people from 2001 and 2,002.
That's a giant piece.
Preaching
of
since
That's huge.
1973, since I was 18. So again, I am taking on the chin for where I blew it. I'm not applauding, look at me, but just trying to give a context.
Really? Because when you went to Mercy Culture Church a couple of weeks ago, they applauded you. They had ticker tape and confetti falling all over your head as you entered the sanctuary, celebrating you and what you've done in this situation.
He had been my PA twice, okay? Since we moved to North Carolina after 2002. The moment he contacted me, I reached out to Sarah on Messenger and said, hey, do you want to talk about anything? Then I didn't hear, so then I sent her an email. Is this still your email? She didn't write back. I thought anything beyond that, I'm going to be bothering her. But when he told me that she left Pensacola because she was upset with me, that's the first time I heard it. The first time I heard that narrative was 2020. And I said, well, send her an apology. I was not aware. So I sent her an apology and I reached out to her two different ways. And then if you fast forward, when we actually get the report now that she has a grievance, and it comes to us in late 2024, because I know what happened. When I spoke at IHOP KC in the midst of the controversy there, if anyone watches the message, what are my opening words? I don't come here with any moral superiority. I myself walk with a limp. I'm a recipient of mercy. Because I want to start there. I do not want to...
Right. And then you went on to berate the congregation and tell them to stay off social media. And I think you likened it to gossip, if I remember correctly. Just so we're clear, you knowing full well that you were in the middle of this mess, went to IHOP to support Mike Bickle when he was in the middle of his mess, and you castigated the congregation to stay off social media so this way the information is controlled. It's 2001, 2002 all over again.
Sound in any way like I've been this perfect man. So people were very upset for me speaking there. I said, don't litigate online. Don't defend Mike online. Don't attack Mike online. Let the process unfold. I was now accused of trying to, quote, silence the voice of the victims. There was an outrage against me. People that knew Sarah reached out to...
Yeah. And how has that aged for you, Doc? How's it aged for you? That you went down there, gotta let the process play out. How did that process play out for IHOP? Because you actually quit. You walked away from them when you realized what they were doing. You didn't have the guts to come out publicly and say it. You pretended that your schedule was too busy to continue to have to be the advocate for IHOP. But you saw the writing on the wall, and you knew full well that Mike Bickle was a freaking pedophile, and you never came out against it. You just walked away. After you wagged your finger at the entire congregation like it was somehow their fault that they wanted to know the truth. The IHOP leadership did the same nonsense that your board tried to do. They tried to bring in outside representation, not for the victims, but for Bickle. They hired somebody from their congregation to do a faux report, but eventually they couldn't avoid it. And then eventually Firefly had to be brought in. And by that point, then the 13-year-old and the 14-year-old victim became public knowledge, and we never heard from you again. So don't bring this up like this is some kind of, paragon of moral virtue on your part.
Sarah, because she was living her life, married with 3 kids, living her life. What she told that grad in 2020, she did not want this to be a public thing, right? And when I was also asked, had there something happened with the married woman, I answered honestly, but very little, because that wasn't my right to say more. And it wasn't this person's business anyway. So now, fast forward to 2024, the moment we hear there's an issue, my board asks the person that was advocating for Sarah, they just got involved, can Dr. Brown and Nancy meet with Sarah? No. Okay, that's the biblical way. If they're
No, 100 times no. You know full well Matthew 18 is not set up for disgraced ministry leaders who sexually abuse their sheep. That's ridiculous. Okay, that's not biblical. And by the way, where's the trauma expert going? Well, doc, that's not really right, because forcing victims to meet with their perpetrators is only going to bring more trauma to them.
There's an issue. Can we meet? No. This is going to go public. In other words, this is now out to, quote, get her justice, and others want to destroy my ministry. I've read their text where they said we want you out of ministry for life, and we're not going to stop until you're out of ministry for life.
Oh, then why don't you have those screenshots? You're telling us that you have people on record sending you texts saying we're going to destroy your ministry? I'd love to see that. I'd love to see who's doing that, because I don't think it's there. I'm the victim.
Okay, so now Royce Report's going to do an article, so we give them a statement. I didn't know everything that was going to be in the article, so I couldn't respond. But to this issue, we said, if it's true, we thought everything was dealt with, and I got the emails, the handwritten notes. How would we know otherwise? That was reality. I then said, okay, if somehow I caused her pain, in other words, if she's saying I caused her pain and the pain remains, then I'm going to take responsibility. I don't know what's true or not, but if she says she's in pain and I caused it, whatever degree I'm part of that, I'm going to take responsibility. So we make a public statement. If that's true, we're beyond mortified, and we do whatever we could to plead for
Who's we?
Forgiveness, because her healing restoration is our highest priority. Then, when I made a public apology December 17th, which I'd asked my board, can I do? I know there's an investigation that's going to take place, but why wait? Why string it out? Let me make a public apology. I said then, if I had understood 23 years ago what was happening in your life, I would have responded differently, but I had no clue. Nancy had no clue. So even then I said, please forgive me. So as far as I understand Scripture, when someone comes and genuinely says, I'm sorry, please forgive me. Like Nancy tells me, the way you acted the other day really hurt me, was you didn't pay attention. So I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. You don't go on a penance tour for 20 years or something. And
oh my Lord. In the same video, and probably in the same half hour, you have accused Sarah of lying multiple times about multiple facets of this problem. And now you're blaming her for not forgiving you.
That's what's been remarkable to me. People, I haven't watched them, but I've been told they put out videos discerning whether my apology was real.
Yeah,
was it damage control? Was it, enough? It's like, I get before the whole world. I don't know what else to do. Before the whole world with Nancy's permission, and dig these things out again that were hidden. I didn't want to shame the husband. I don't want to shame Nancy. I don't know what else you can do but say I was done. It was dealt with. It's under the blood. But now I'll
Really? So I don't know what else to do. It was dealt with. It was under the blood. So you dismiss it and then are mad because people don't like the fact that you dismissed it. That's the problem, Doc. That's the problem, is you're not owning any of it. everything is either a lie, an attack of Satan, people trying to destroy your ministry. I don't understand why people are upset with me.
Revisit it again before the whole world and drag the thing before the whole world and say, I'm sorry, please forgive me. I don't know what you can do beyond that.
Yeah, which
Tell
is
the truth.
which is humility.
Oh,
Dr. Brown, my mind is honestly going in so many directions right now because Sarah, I want her restoration. I want her to know Jesus. I want her to have an intimate.
What? Did Heather Schott just question Sarah's salvation? I want her to know Jesus? Who the hell do you think you are?
Relationship with the Lord, but her story has dramatically changed with the proof of these emails of years and years and years.
Okay. That's a lie, right? Everybody's following along, right? So Dr. Brown comes with like what he thinks is receipts. It's like 5 emails over a course of 10 years where Sarah was, nice, where she wasn't like saying, hey, you're an evil person. And because she didn't say that, that somehow disqualifies what she knows happened to her. Oh, by the way, and you're the one who's really concerned about victims of sex trafficking, right?
I mean, 13 years after moving of relationship and personal, intimate things that she's sharing with you and testimonies that she's sharing and asking for prayer. This is not
5 emails in 13 years. That's what he showed. I probably have 5 emails from a million people well, it's probably too many, but I probably have 5 emails from hundreds of people over a 13-year period. That doesn't necessarily indicate anything. I mean, the fact that she revealed that she had apparently at least 2 miscarriages and she still felt comfortable talking to Dr. Brown about it, again, only indicates the strength of the dynamic of the relationship between her and Dr. Brown. I don't think Sarah Monk has been anything but honest about that. That's what made it so crushing, what was done to her.
not somebody that distrusts or is showing the behavior that I'm intimidated and afraid of this human being like it is.
I don't think Sarah Monk has ever said that she's intimidated or afraid by Dr. Brown. I think she got righteously angry when she realized she was the victim here. And that's why Dr. Brown didn't have any emails, apparently, after that realization, which was, I guess, around 2013.
Has also been portrayed about you. And I do want to ask about Ron Cantor because he's had a long relationship with you and it's been in and out for a very long time. And he has inserted himself into this storyline. So there's really no removing him. I love your heart to do so, but he's inserted himself. We can't remove him. He's out everywhere sharing his story. And
you notice the mocking, sharing his story. Ron Cantor actually knows Dr. Michael Brown, unlike you, Heather. You only know him because he basically gave you the street cred you needed to open Mercy Culture Church, and he's your apostolic elder. So I get why you're beholden to him, just like your lackey there is beholden to you. But dismissing Ron Cantor, who knew Dr. Brown for decades, only reveals how utterly stupid you are, or at least how utterly stupid you look on this interview.
Her story from his perspective. And this is a big piece of it for me personally. And we're going to fully go into it in segment 2. But I want to hear from your side and your testimony. What was your relationship like with him? How far does it extend back? And how many times was there betrayals or going in and out of relationship?
I don't want to say anything negative about Ron.
Okay.
And I love him and pray for him. I don't think there's any reason to go through breakdowns or if what happened or when we were on different sides of things in the past. I'd just rather deal with the reality now. I do know for a fact, well, I don't even want to say that. I do not want to be here in any way is going to put him in a bad light. He
Do you know why? Because Ron Cantor has the receipts. That's why. So it's a very smart call on Dr. Brown's part to not want to further poke the bear.
We each have to stand before God for what we do. I pray for God's best in his life, and I'm just going to leave it there. I'm sorry.
Why do you believe that Sarah's story has so dramatically changed over the years?
As far as I know, okay, so again, even in 2020, there was no idea of abuse or abusive behavior. Zero. The only thing was maybe, or that it was an ongoing wound all these years. It was just stuff from earlier, maybe impacted her differently than we realized. There was at one point, it was March 27th. She'd been house sitting for us, which she did a couple of times because we had this little dog, Nancy and I were away. And she was, for some reason, rummaging through some of our drawers and found a note I'd written. Mm-hmm. And when I'd met with the husband, Ray, and talked, and then I said, when I gave the other side and his wife's participation, it was totally mutual, but her participation, it changed the tone of things. So I had written down some inappropriate things that she had said to me. Again, I'm guilty of my part. She's guilty of her part. Just if someone accused me, you tried to initiate this or start this, I just written it down. Somehow Sarah was rummaging through our drawers, found that.
I just want to address a couple things. One, my understanding is these notes contain sexual fantasies that Dr. Brown was entertaining about the married woman. I can't verify that, but I believe somebody testified to that, maybe Ray or maybe Sarah, probably Sarah, since she's the one who found the note. I've always found it very suspicious that somebody as smart as Dr. Brown would write such a thing down and leave it in a drawer, and then leave it in the drawer when he knew that Sarah would be house sitting. So, there's a lot of, but he's portraying this like this was just a note of the inappropriate things that Kim said to me. And if I'm also not mistaken, Ray has refuted that. And that's actually one of the things that brought Ray out into the public to say, why are you bad-mouthing my dead wife?
So this is inappropriate things that Sarah had said to you.
No, that's Sarah.
No. This is the previous relationship.
There was never an inappropriate syllable between Sarah and me.
Things said by
with a married woman,
right? Kim to me, right? That I was surprised when she said them, and then I wrote them down. I mean, I flushed them out of my mind all these years now, but I wrote them down in case anyone ever said, "Well, you tried to initiate this or start." I said, "Well, actually."
Right, and this is the other part that was brought up in a previous video. So his claim is he wrote this stuff down in case anybody questioned, what was said between the two, kind of like a journaling thing, if you will. And then when somebody, maybe it was Cantor, when he told this to them, they said, "That's great. Then you have the proof. Let's see it." I threw it away. What? How is that vaguely believable? So you wrote something down to protect yourself, and then at some point you thought, well, I don't need this anymore. I may as well throw it away.
There's a whole other side here.
And you journaled all the time. That was part of your
this wasn't my journal.
Writing things
This
down.
wasn't my journal, but this was, I write stuff all the time to remember. So she found this, texted me March 27th, or messaged, whatever the communication was then. We then met the next morning, Nancy and I, with her for a couple hours. And Nancy feels that was the real damaging thing, because our interaction by then was totally normal, Sarah and me, that she so looked to me when we found some of their earlier notes, so looked to me and honored me as a spiritual dad, as a man of God, that seeing and realizing that I had this inappropriate emotional relationship with another woman, that really hurt her. That's just Nancy's view. That
Yeah, what a way to blame your wife for trying to smear your victim, right? So now, mind you, let's think about this logically. Sarah's 19 years old. Dr. Brown is her spiritual idol, right? Besides being an employee of his, that's her pastor. That's her spiritual source for her spiritual formation. And then she discovers these sexual fantasies, even though he's claiming it's just the things that the wife said to him. Isn't it possible that that is what made her think twice about the behavior that Dr. Brown was engaging with her? You know what I'm saying? So in other words, maybe she thought, of the hand-holding, cuddling, butt-slapping stuff that, oh, that's just dad? And then she sees dad is like planning to have an affair with a married woman and starts suddenly that pedestal lowers a little bit that you got him on. And then maybe you take another look at what it is that's happening to you.
Hurt her more than we realized.
Well, as with any daughter.
Yeah.
Right. Deeply.
All right, this feels almost illegal to know, but our windows were so old and just desperately needed to be
Deeply. And that I spent time with her. Nancy hung out with her for almost 2 hours after. But that night in my journal, met her at Walmart to talk more. The next day, she drove me to the airport. Travel again. So I thought everything was normal. So that may have impacted her more deeply. I don't want to underestimate that. And again, that's a negative fruit of my sin. But all I know is people reached out to her, people who had an agenda against me. I know some of the people by name. I know some of the interaction behind it, and basically recruited her for their purpose. Now, they may genuinely believe they're helping her. They may genuinely think she needs this. I don't know. I don't want to question their motivation. But from what I can tell, and then from a clip someone sent me the other day, she has been convinced to believe that she is a victim of sexual abuse.
So now, what Dr. Brown just said is that Sarah is not a victim of sexual abuse, even though the Firefly report says that she was, and that she apparently is too stupid to realize that she's been manipulated by people into thinking she was a victim of sexual abuse, when in reality, nothing really, there was nothing to see here. That's just despicable.
She'd already come to her own conclusions. The only thing I had to convince her of, unsuccessfully at the time, was that she was a victim of sexual abuse, clergy sexual abuse.
I mean, even saying the words is so mind-boggling to me.
Is convinced.
That person was Ron Cantor, by the way. So I guess the tack that they're going to try here is to claim that one outtake from an interview indicates that Sarah wasn't really a victim of sexual abuse and that Cantor convinced her that she was. I mean, I don't know. It's so despicable the way they're just trouncing all over Sarah Monk at this point. He's displayed private email communications about her miscarriages, and now he's basically telling her like she's too dumb to realize that she was somehow manipulated by Ron Cantor.
Yeah, according to everything I know.
That isn't okay, because if she never called herself that prior and all of a sudden has been convinced by individuals that have to come and tell her you are this, then they are portraying or they are putting their agenda or exploiting somebody else for their own agenda.
No. And once again, maybe you should stay in your lane. Not sure what that lane is because it isn't being a pastor. And if you had a real trauma counselor on the show, unlike the shill that you got, they would probably interrupt you and say you don't know what you're talking about, right? Because the way it actually works is that oftentimes victims do have to face their own victimhood, and they can't. They hide it. They're too ashamed. They're too traumatized by it. And sometimes it does take somebody to come along and say, hey, what happened to you wasn't right. What happened to you, the way you describe it. Remember, don't lose sight of the fact that all of the substantive material of what happened to Sarah Monk came from Sarah Monk. It's just that for 10 years, her faith got shipwrecked because of it. Then she started realizing like her victimhood about it. And then, yes, Ron Cantor apparently had some kind of conversation with her years after the fact and just basically provided the definition of what she was facing. of what she's been going through. That's not projecting something onto somebody. That's clarifying for somebody what the reality is.
And so at no point ever prior to this scenario and this story breaking out has she ever come out and said, I'm a victim in the last to you, or said, I feel victimized.
No, in the 2020 communication, and I think some of the texts got printed in different places. No, it didn't exist. You have to realize when we saw the account, when Ron contacted me, somebody told him what was going on. He contacted me in probably October of last year and asked it. I said, well, here's the whole deal. It's no national scandal. Somehow Ron had gotten absorbed the last year, like read a book or some books about clergy sexual abuse. I said, Mike, that's what it is. And you groomed the married woman. I said, what are you talking about? I mean,
well, let me explain for you, Dr. Brown. When you are in a position of spiritual authority and you're talking to somebody who idolizes you and looks up to you, and you have normal conversations, and then you turn those conversations slowly sexual, and then you engage in literal phone sex with that person, and then you tell that person to stop sleeping with their husband, and then you ask twice to meet with that person, that's what Ron is talking about.
It's like saying my name is Elon Musk, or Donald Trump. It's like, what are you, it's a complete foreign world. What are you talking about? And then basically reached out, to find out more from Sarah. And that's where the narrative came. When we saw that document, my board saw it, Nancy and I saw it, we were devastated because, like, people are going to believe this. They're going to believe this victim narrative. And
wow. So now Sarah Monk, just to be clear, according to Dr. Brown, is not even a victim. It's odd because the Firefly report, which your board commissioned, says she is a victim, specifically of sexual clergy abuse. But not according to Dr. Michael Brown. She has instead been duped into a victimhood mentality, for some reason, by a friend of Dr. Brown's.
Now I can't say a syllable to differ with an account because now I'm attacking the victim. And still, to this day, Nancy and I pray for Sarah. And it grieves us that, look, the people that reached out to Sarah, I don't mean Ron, but the people that first reached out to her did it to get to me. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, they try to set something up for us to meet. Mm-hmm.
No! For the 100th time! Matthew 18 is not about that. And by the way, if you got people who've reached out to you, I'm sorry, who claim you have text that want to destroy your ministry, and that's the only reason why they reach out to Sarah, provide the receipts. You obviously had the opportunity here. You provided the receipts you wanted to for Heather Schott to display as you were basically smearing your victims.
Go public with negative reports when I'm completely accessible. Just reach out to me if you have any.
It goes back to my earlier conversation onto what? When I observe an injustice, and this is what we do every day. I mean, we are face to face with the most horrific, you'll vomit, the most horrific abuse and trauma to 2, 5, 15-year-olds in this country. And so I'm so grieved sitting here at this moment. Mm-hmm. Our nation is so off target. We pay attention to the shiny objects, and Satan loves this. Mm-hmm. He would love for this conversation to continue for the next 10 years while America is the number one nation purchasing children for sex.
Right.
Number one. Our Gen Zers are the number one age demographic selling their own bodies for sex.
Talk about conflating two different issues. He wants to be bombastic about true injustice that far exceeds whatever Michael Brown's been accused of. There's no question. But it has no relevance to the conversation. Dr. Michael Brown is not a shiny object to Sarah Monk. He's not a shiny object to Ray or to his dead wife. Okay? He is the abuser to them. And for you, as an alleged trauma expert, to dismiss that out of hand because there's worse people, if I'm hearing the argument right, well, that we just want to focus on the shiny object when we should be focusing on this. You can do both. We can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Celebrating the Bonnie Blues, this culture of the world that sleeps with 1,000 guys in a day, and now Satan loves it. Please get all trapped up in the church that's supposed to be the solution. So I'm so grieved because of the atrocities that are happening as we speak that get no attention, no prosecution. I can tell you that there's 6,882 cases of children being sexually violated in Texas schools that are unreported to law enforcement, where the superintendents in Texas squash it because it hurts enrollment.
That would be absolutely horrible. Maybe you should be doing a podcast about that. Number one. Number two, it's interesting that, you're saying that these people are being dissuaded from reporting things, because that's exactly what happened in the Bicklegate story. 16 staff members, different people from Mike Bickle, sexually abused children, or certainly young adults, let's say, the people who were going to the IHOP school. So they were, probably like 18 to 25-ish. And instead of encouraging them to go to law enforcement, they were encouraged to not. They were encouraged to Matthew 18 with their perpetrator. And you don't have the same outrage about that, I guess, because that's in the church.
Real issues, real victims.
So again, the message: Sarah is not a real victim, and the clergy sexual abuse that Firefly found for Dr. Michael Brown is not a real issue.
And it's nothing, and you can't get the Texas House of the Senate. We just had the Take It Down Act signed for revenge porn and things that are going on. There's no prosecutions in this country of real victims. So I know this is a segment too, but we are so off base.
Yes, we are.
To touch the nerve on what Satan is truly doing in our culture. And
what's he truly doing in the church, you jackass? That's the point. The world is the world. Our job as the church is to represent Christ and the gospel, not to playfully smack 19-year-olds on their butt and have phone sex with other married women. Are you serious right now?
Loves this.
Yes, he does. If you want to be an advocate, then go be an advocate for a real victim of sexual abuse.
Wow. Heather, you are a despicable human being, because not only are you basically smearing the memory of a dead woman, and now also essentially agreeing that Sarah Monk is not a victim. And you do that within the paradigm of pretending to care about women.
I mean, they know it. Pastor Heather, let me tell you something.
This is such
You can talk to my team. They're nowhere. When we show up at the court steps, we can't get lawyers to show up and defend any legitimate multi-year, like my sister Ilonka, 6 years of sexual trafficking and abuse. We've got girls we've rescued 14 years of trafficking by their own fathers. Can't get a single lawyer to show up and defend them because they can't get paid.
What does that have to do with Dr. Michael Brown? I know the answer. Absolutely nothing. You want to talk about the shiny object. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to say, don't look at Dr. Brown and what he did in his insane defense here. Look at this instead. Look at all these injustices going on. And no one is arguing that they're not injustices. If, I can't verify the numbers he has, but assuming he's telling the truth, but it has nothing to do with why this podcast is happening.
There's no defense for them. Where are these virtual warriors? Where's your voices for those kids?
Come on.
Where?
It is such an intellectually stupid and lazy argument. It's like, you're a warrior for this problem, but you're not a warrior for that problem, so therefore I get to dismiss this problem. No. There are plenty. By the way, you are claimed to be a sexual trauma expert. That's your calling. That's your job. That's what you have chosen. Other people have chosen other things. By the way, exposing or discerning within the body of Christ what is true and false is entirely in the Bible. It's completely biblical. God doesn't sit there and say, well, don't worry about these things because they're not as big as those things.
When you
Come
show
on.
up and put your name and your title
That's
and
right.
your acclaim on the
That's
line,
right.
Come on.
Shut the hell up, you sanctimonious, arrogant person. Whose only job here is defend a man who should not be defended like this, and you're going to drag through the mud all the other victims of true abuse that you deal with and pretend somehow that everybody should be worried about those people and nobody should be worried about Sarah Monk. Nobody should be worried about Kim or about the sanctity of the body of Christ. That somehow is not important.
your pocketbook, your
With
money,
no fame
no
tied to
That's
it.
the reason.
in the
right there.
shadows, in the
That's
darkness.
not-
This is why I'm sitting here and I'm just going, dear God, this is Brett Kavanaugh all over again.
Yeah.
And this is, again,
Brett Kavanaugh was guilty of sin, and everybody knows it. Unfortunately, the way that our system works is the party in power got to override the party not in power, and that's the only reason why he got on the Supreme Court. And by the way, it's like, so I guess not only is Sarah not a victim, but I can't remember the woman's name that Brett Kavanaugh sexually assaulted, but she's not a real victim either, right?
it's for segment 2, but there's a spirit that I want
Yes.
to address in the second segment that is working in the American church and it's working in the American culture. And we're seeing the
Without-
results of it here.
Yes, we are.
And that spirit
Yep.
is unto death. There is no redemption.
That's
There is
it.
no
They
biblical
say there's
justice.
restoration, redemption,
Zero.
biblical justice.
Zero.
There is zero. It tears down. It does not build up.
Because
Yeah,
that
you-
spirit and the people, sorry, Pastor Les,
No, sorry.
that is accusing you. It's not about you.
Yeah.
It's not.
It's about him. Don't let these people distract you. This is about Dr. Michael Brown and what Dr. Michael Brown did. It's not about victims of sex trafficking. It's not about some kind of secret spirit that's like, the shiny object secret spirit or whatever the nonsense this guy wants to pretend it's about. His job here is to distract people from what we've got together to talk about, which is Dr. Michael Brown.
Sadly, those voices online, it's not even about Sarah.
No.
They don't give one
It's
flying
not
rip
about
because
You
they
said
show
that.
me that they've shown up.
We're
and-
about to go there. We're
Yeah,
about.
Yeah. It's not about Sarah? Okay. All right. Again, the hubris and arrogance on display here is staggering. And it's only designed for one thing, to prop up Dr. Brown, to be able to excuse his return to ministry and pretend that the things that he did to these two women somehow are just simply not important in the grand scheme of things. But somebody should stand up for the Sarah Monks of the world so that the next time a 19-year-old is being groomed by a 45-year-old minister of holiness, they may not take 13 years to realize it.
To go there.
I'm going to have a stroke.
I know. We are using, this is self-control, Dr. Brown. We
Self-control.
are all actually showing
No,
self-control right now. I do want to ask you, and if you have a response to what we're saying, but I do have another big question for you.
Yeah.
Do you have a response
No,
first?
no.
So there's like this frenzy when the investigation was released. They're saying you are accused, you are guilty all over our social media, but Dr. Brown is guilty of sexual abuse. And then your elders and board hear this and they completely reject and, oh, we thought Dr. Brown was submitted, but they're rejecting it. Isn't that nice that he can just go and reject these statements by an investigator? What do you have to say to
So
that?
when my board, I told my board, hey, here's what happened 23 years ago, just so you know, and told them. And then when they got the document from Ron, everyone was shocked. And so we met. I said, no, exactly what I told you is true and accurate. Take a lie detector test. They said, well, we have to do an investigation. Now, live and learn in terms of what investigations can and can't do. But because I had spoken to Pickles and this third-party investigation there, so they said, we have to do, I said, do 2 or 3, whatever you have to do. I'll do a lie detector test, bring the truth to light. Because I knew what happened. I knew if there were cameras on everything, videotaping my whole life. I knew what happened and didn't happen.
Yeah.
So bring everything to the light. So they immediately contacted one of my board members, lives in Arizona, contacted the best law firm they knew. And they said, it's going to be ruthless, Mike. They're going to get the labels on your underwear. I said, I'll give him my laptop, I'll give him my cell phone, everything, take it. Full access to my passwords, whatever you need for access, everything. Email, history, journal. So they announced they're going with this. And then those advocating for Sarah said, we won't work with them. They're just going to try to defend Dr. Brown. It's like, no, this is going to be a ruthless, find out the facts, but it was a 2-part process.
Okay, before we get to the 2-part process, first the lie here. The law firm that they reached out to, that the line of fire board was going to employ to do the investigation, specialized in defending the perpetrators of sexual abuse, not the victims of sexual abuse. That's what their perspective was. That's what their expertise was in. So the advocates for the victims and the victims themselves said, we're not going to submit to a bogus investigation, particularly since they probably saw that the same thing happened with Bicklegate and IHOP, right? IHOP for months pushed back. It refused to hire a legitimate third-party investigator who specialized in clergy sexual abuse, and instead had a report written out by a member of their own congregation. And the victims didn't even participate in it. And they still put out a bogus report that months later was debunked by the actual report that they had to settle on with Firefly. So the victims in this case said no. And the board was like, all right, I guess we got caught trying to cook the books. So instead, we're going to develop a 2-part scheme. And what this scheme is we're going to hire Firefly, since Firefly did Bicklegate, and we know that the victims will say okay to that. But then it doesn't really matter what they find, because we're going to give their results to an elder accountability team. And they're the ones who are going to decide what to do with the results of the investigation. So they didn't do any investigating. They parsed out the report from the investigators. That's all they did. So who was on this board? 4 people. There was supposed to be a trauma expert. They didn't put that person on, so they violated their agreement to begin with. Then for some reason, Mr. Bernice, who was on the Firefly board, if I'm not mistaken, was the chief board member. He's on the elder accountability team. How in the world is that not a ridiculous conflict of interest? Doesn't matter. The elder accountability team, the first thing they did in their response to the Firefly report was dismiss the primary finding that Dr. Brown engaged in clergy sexual abuse. That was the first thing they did. They made up some absolutely ridiculous logic for why it wasn't really that. It was just a leadership oopsie. You should go through my channel, because I did a video when the Elder Accountability Team report came out. So the Elder Accountability Team report was designed for one function and one function only, and that was to exonerate. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. That was to get Dr. Brown back into ministry. And so that's what they did. They opened up by saying, well, there really wasn't clergy sexual abuse. We disagree with Firefly. Instead, he just had a leadership oopsie. And then they went through a couple of things. They did some pre forma stuff about how it's really important to be concerned about victims of sexual abuse, even though this wasn't one. And then, of course, their conclusion was there's no reason whatsoever that Dr. Brown should not return to ministry immediately. Surprise, surprise. And what this does is it gives Dr. Brown the ability to probably tell you what he's about to say, and I haven't seen this in advance, but that we agreed this was going to be the process. And the Elder Accountability Team said, I can go back to work, so screw all you guys. I'm going back to work.
All the best an investigation can do is uncover facts. And even then, is it vetting witnesses? Is it bringing all testimony? For example, all the stuff I showed you, this handwritten note and the emails, I submitted them to investigate, and none of that got published.
None of it made it there. Of course not.
Nancy's whole story never got published.
So now the accusation is that the Firefly report was somehow fixed or rigged. I think, again, the difference is that the people who want Dr. Brown back in ministry, the charismatical machine, they only believe everything Dr. Brown says, and they dismiss everything that the victims and all the witnesses say. The Firefly report looked at all of it.
And that's a whole other story. What I learned through the investigation. Okay, so they wouldn't participate, and instead they insisted on going with one of these other groups that would be kind of the advocacy group or, quote, victim friendly. So I said to a friend of mine, a Christian attorney I've known for decades, going before the Supreme Court, and it's been part of many investigations. I said, aren't you like guilty before you go in? And he goes, Mike, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So, and when the investigator was, the Firefly was talking to one of my board members, board member asked, how long do you think this will take? And he said, depends on how many victims there are. I said, I'm already judged.
Yeah, when you said victims from the beginning, right, it means you've already set your
mind. And now the person, so the married woman with the Lord deceased now, in the most mutual buddy, friend, hangout couple, peers you could imagine, right? She's
not peers. I know he wants to keep portraying it that way. He was the spiritual authority. They were not peers.
He's now a survivor.
Right.
So just the terminology.
Right, exactly.
Professor Jeff Seif, who's earning his PhD in criminology at Cambridge, took apart the Firefly report and said, how do you name people survivors you've already judged?
Okay. I've looked at Mr. Seif's analysis, and I believe Mr. Seif also works like in Jewish ministries, which is probably why he's defending Dr. Brown. And the bottom line is it was a absurd conclusion that he drew based upon the fact that he's a criminologist. So he was looking at this strictly from a legal criminal standpoint. Nobody's making any legal criminal arguments here. All right. Michael Brown, slapping Sarah on the bottom or having phone sex with the married woman did not break any laws that I'm aware of. So there was no reason to approach this from a criminologist standpoint.
Right.
You've already made a verdict. So anyway, I understood that the summary of the...
I'm sorry, I don't want to let this go. The two people in question were victims, Mike. You've already admitted that. You're just disputing the severity of it, right? Your stance has not been, I don't even know who Sarah Monk is, because then you would have accusation and defense, and then you should not prejudge and say, this person's automatically a victim. But there's been no disagreement from you that the two people in question, that these things did happen. You just like to sanitize it. So the husband, Ray, says you were having phone sex with his wife. You say you had an emotional soul tie and that it was really inappropriate and, that you travailed and wailed for days. So there's no dispute. The person, because of the nature of who you were, to her, who she was, is why she's classified as a victim. And the same, and even more so with Sarah, right? You don't disagree that the stuff happened with Sarah. You just pretend that she's lying about the stuff in the middle, right? Because you admit to the kissing on the head, you admit to the smacking on the bottom, you admit that it was, really wrong, inappropriate. You claim that you were unaware that it really bothered her, that when it came to light, you tried to reach out, you did a public apology for it. That's why she's classified as the victim. Not so much just because of the behavior between the two parties, which both essentially agreed to, but because you were not only her boss, you were her pastor, you were her spiritual idol. So Firefly, who's investigating clergy sexual abuse, not criminology, correctly classifies the two as victims.
The report was going to come out, just a summary. But it was a twofold process. It would now be submitted to an independent team of elders, okay? I did not have, two of them I'd only met shortly before. I did not have ongoing contact for, we're going to interact. And they're an independent team of elders. They will now oversee the process, and they will render a verdict. And here's what happened. Initially, the board said, hey, Mike, it's just protocol during an investigation to step away. So we figured it's going to be a few weeks, November, December. And then they said, look, just do it. because even working with one of these other groups, it's going to prove what we know, that there was no sexual activity, there was no physical adultery, there was nothing before, there was nothing after, and you dealt with everything to your knowledge 23 years ago.
Which, to be clear, is what the Firefly report says.
Yes.
All of the things.
So they said,
no, to be clear, shill, that's not what the Firefly report says. I urge you, go read the Firefly report. It says that he's guilty of sexual abuse. It says that the testimony provided by the two victims, in this case, the victim's husband and the other victim, is supported. It says that at every turn for the last 25 years, Dr. Michael Brown has deflected, defended, and tried to cover up this story. That's what the Firefly report actually says. Liar.
that's all we need. And then unless you're hiding other stuff,
Yeah.
Right.
that's all we need. That's why we're doing the investigation, to prove nothing else happened beyond this. Okay, great. And
It's interesting what he just admitted. So his board told him that they were commissioning Firefly just to prove everything they already know. That their thinking was, well, we believe you, Mike. We don't believe the victim, so we're going to hire this outside group to prove that we're right. But that's not what an investigation's supposed to be, is it?
yes, even with all the other allegations
Right.
in the report, it does prove that. But then it'll be submitted to the elders. So the plan was, I step out for a few weeks, get this done. I had a full schedule from January on. We move on. Well, I had a trip scheduled, an annual trip to a persecuted country where leaders come from around the country just to be there for me. It was approved by my board. Well, people were e-stalking. And my board had just announced that I'd step back from ministry. It was supposed to be after that trip. Well, somebody finds out I'm going to this country, contacts the board. I'm in the country. I've arrived there with my grandson and a colleague, spent over $10,000 in airfare. People have come from around the country just to be with me behind closed doors. And board member says, Mike, you can't do the meetings because we just announced that you're stepping back. So it was supposed to be after this. So I didn't minister. I flew to this country. Leaders came.
Wow.
People I love. People threatened with martyrdom. At least 6.
That's that's a horrible story, Mike. But you know what? You said you were stepping away from ministry, and then you purchased $10,000 worth of airfare to go do ministry. I understand that it sounds like whatever country it is probably needed ministers. They didn't need you, Mike. They didn't need you in the middle of this. See, the problem is that from the beginning, you have dismissed this as some kind of an attack on you and your ministry. So you were never truly investigated. I just want to find out the truth. How do we know this? Because you bought $10,000 worth of tickets to go do ministry in another country when you promised everybody you were stepping aside. How do we know this? Because during the investigative period, you put out your autobiography. So spare me the pearl clutching here. You knew what you were getting yourself into. Quite frankly, I give credit to the board who at least probably didn't want the public spectacle of the fact that you would have been called a liar because you said that you were going to step aside from ministry. And by the way, I'm not being unfair. There was an event at Mercy Culture where Dr. Brown went to. It was a conference, and he got a standing ovation. And I did a video, and my only issue was with the standing ovation and the gushing from Landon Schott, Heather's husband, at the time about standing with somebody before the investigation was even completed. I mean, that was ridiculous. But some people were critical of why you attended. And I believe I said at the time, and if not, I'll be on public record now, that's ridiculously unfair. You have every right to go to a church. I don't have an issue with that. You had every right if you wanted to go to a conference. I don't have an issue with that. That's not ministry. If you went to the conference and spoke, that would have been a problem. But you didn't do any of that. You snuck back into your Facebook and you were posting memes every day of like Bible verses and stuff like that. But I don't really take much issue with that. That's not the point. But going to another country for a pre-planned conference where you were supposed to minister is the exact opposite of what you promised to do.
People we've laid hands on and sent out have been martyred in this country.
Wow.
I sit there in the meetings and smile. Why? Because I'm under submission. The next month, pastor from Singapore, dear friend, says, hey, come over. I'm going to pay your way over. Just hang out with me. He takes a picture and posts it to say, I'm a friend of Mike Brown. Now the uproar, you're in Singapore ministering. The petition starts to keep, you shouldn't be ministering during this time. I was just sitting there having.
I don't know anything about that story. I didn't cover it, so it didn't rise. If it didn't rise to my knowledge, I don't know how public it was. But if the story is being presented correctly, that he went over to Singapore because a friend of his paid for him to come over to hang out, which sounds a little odd to me. But if that's the case, I don't take any issue with that.
Meals and hanging out. So, the e-stalking was crazy.
Okay, that's not e-stalking. Again, the majority of Dr. Brown's ministry and the Schotts and most charismaniacs is online. That's where the bulk of the attention comes from. I mean, Brown certainly has other vehicles with the radio show and whatnot, but what they do then is they try to pretend that anybody who uses the same vehicles that they use is somehow less credible.
So when I saw this thing dragging on, I said to a board member, I've never taken a sabbatical in my life. This could go on for months. I'll take a sabbatical. And for people to say, well, you just rushed back into ministry. I've been sitting for now 7 months.
And Sarah was sitting for 13 years. And Kim for 20 years before she passed away. The bottom line is the investigation takes as long as the investigation takes. And I might add, it didn't take 7 months. Things had to escalate to this point because initially you denied everything. Initially, you were trying to fundraise saying that, you were being attacked by Satan. So I believe that Firefly was, and by the way, and then the next problem was that your board tried to hire a BS law firm to defend you instead of actually investigate what you did. So by the time they got to Firefly, if I'm not mistaken, it was late December-ish. And I believe their report dropped in April-ish. That sounds about the same amount of time it took them to investigate Bickle. And Bickle's things went back 4 decades, right? So, this notion that somehow he was the victim, again, he was being put out because of how long this was taking. Spare me.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was doing 5 radio broadcasts a week, at one point 10 radio broadcasts a week, writing 5 articles a week, teaching at 6 schools annually, writing 2 or 3 books at a time, and traveling and preaching around the world. I stopped all of it. The next time I'm scheduled to preach will be 7 months between sermons.
I've heard that argument before. He brought it up in the, I think in the wilderness video. It's 7 months, Doc. I think the period of time that you said earlier encompassed the abuse was 9 months. So you had to put things on pause for 7 months. And then in terms of getting fast back into ministry, if I'm not mistaken, the week after your cooked elder accountability report came out, you went right back into ministry. I don't think you could have done it any faster. It sounds like maybe you took a weekend off to get ready for it. And then the next thing you know, there's the 5-minute video of you basically saying that you're not going to talk about this and you're just going to get back into ministry. And then there was the 30-minute video for the wilderness thing. And now a couple of weeks later, there's this 3.5, self-victimized orgy fest that you and Heather Schott cooked up, where you get to play the victim because you had to wait 7 months. And of the 7 months, half that time is entirely chargeable to you because you initially defended everything, deflected everything, tried to fundraise off of it, then tried to hire a law firm that would protect your interests and not your victims. And then by the time you actually got to have to settle on Firefly, you were out of your ministry for about, I think, 3 or 4 months tops. That doesn't strike me as being overly egregious. So what's telling is that as soon as the report dropped from the elder accountability team led by your board member, lacking the trauma victim counselor, as soon as that dropped, you were like, well, that's it. That's it. They've decided, and you never discuss the Firefly investigation. It's only the Elder Accountability Team report. You never discuss the findings, the sexual abuse, none of it. Except in this video where you're basically smearing the victims, calling them liars, and then your buddies here are like trying to pretend that the real problem are the people who dare to hold you accountable for what it is that you did. We are an hour and 40 minutes into this, which is part 3, reviewing this video. We are only at the 1 hour, 33 minute mark of this video, of the actual video, which is 3.5 hours long. So there's still about 2 hours left on this thing. My God. I'm going to try to get through it all. Leave your comments. We'll take a break here. I'll try to get back to everybody. Give it a thumbs up, share it. Test everything and hold fast.